Healthy narcissism. Is there such a thing? For me personally, as I've learned about narcissism, as I've learned about how that works in my life and the lives that it's hurt, the lives that it's destroyed, and the crazy moments that I have where I'm not sure what's going on, I never really attributed narcissism to being healthy or to ever being a good thing. In fact, still as I talk about it, it's not something that I come to the terms of hey, this is a thing that I really believe, or this is a thing that I really engage with. But I do have to admit that narcissism is on a spectrum, and it is on kind of like a low to high spectrum of narcissism and those narcissistic traits and how they interact on a day-to-day basis and the intent behind them. You see, everybody has a little bit of narcissism in them. Everybody has traits at times, but oftentimes those traits are limited to maybe one or two things. And even with those two things, that's pretty minuscule of the actual adverse effects of narcissism in that person's life. Maybe they might be selfish in a certain aspect, or maybe they might be prideful in a certain aspect. But it's not necessarily that it's a whole manipulation culture and mindset that's actually going through their head through multiple things that make up of narcissism. So when you think of narcissism, you got to think of how it's like a whole scale. So some people term the lower end of the scale being healthy or manageable or non-toxic in one sense, narcissism. And then it moves forward with tendencies and traits and having narcissism, being diagnosed with narcissism, and this whole scale. Then oftentimes how I've seen it demonstrated is all the way up with narcissism to then sociopath or psychopath, and it keeps on kind of going like that. So this entire scale that's there. And I heard a little while ago, people saying stuff about healthy narcissism, and it never sat well with me. And it didn't sit well because how they were describing it, how they were portraying it, really could give a lot of false impressions to a lot of people. Because narcissism, what I think at its core, is about image, and it's about control, and it's about manipulation. And when you have all these things together, you really don't have a healthy aspect of narcissism. Now, like I said, it is on a scale. It is on a 0 to 100 of how narcissistic you are in one sense. And I do think there is healthier aspects or healthier versions of that than the ones that are more devious or evil or manipulative. So I wanted to read a quote real quick that talks about it. And it uses the word healthy narcissism, but I wanted to kind of approach it first so you understand where I'm coming from when I say healthy narcissism. Because I don't believe in someone being narcissistic and abusive and as ever calling that or quantifying that as healthy. But let me read this real quick. Healthy narcissism, both personally and organizationally, manifests in confidence rather than certainty, empathy rather than ingratitude, clarity rather than confusion, humility rather than arrogance, curiosity rather than defensiveness. And when I read that, I thought it was really interesting of how it correlates those things to each other and how it correlates the difference or the opposite of healthy narcissism versus toxic narcissism. Now, I still don't think I'm ever going to put healthy narcissism in my day-to-day vocabulary because I don't really think it paints the right picture of trying to build awareness about the abuse and the harmful aspects of narcissism. I think I'd rather just call it by the words that it says here. So it demonstrates in confidence rather than certainty. Okay, so with someone that is dealing with narcissism, they're going to be more oh, this is a fact. This is black and white. This is certain. This is exactly what it's supposed to be. There's no area for gray. There's no area for your opinion. There's only the area for my opinion, for what I want, for what I think. Versus being confident, that is different. It's not like you're just running over people. It's hey, I'm confident in my decision, but I'm willing to be open to yours. I'm willing to be open to another person's perspective. Having empathy rather than ingratitude. So rather than trying to use and abuse other person's feelings and emotions to control or to manipulate them, being able to have empathy. That doesn't really go hand in hand with narcissism, does it? And clarity rather than confusion. When you think of it and you think of that narcissistic relationship in your life, how often did you feel clear about where you were in the relationship? You didn't. In fact, most people say it felt like being stuck in a fog. It like being stuck not knowing which way to go, not understanding right from left, up and down, whatever was going on, because they didn't even understand the truth or the real reality of the situation. They were inundated with a fake reality, with a fantasy, with a fog that kept them in the dark. The other one, humility rather than arrogance. I think we can all agree that someone who's narcissistic doesn't ever really portray humility. Doesn't ever portray that consistently, that's for sure. I used to joke growing up along with my parents at times of like, oh, like I'm the most humble person around. Like, oh, like I wrote the book on humility and how I attained it. And like little jokes like that, but down the core, there was a lot of truth to what I was thinking. Didn't have that humility at all. Then it says curiosity rather than defensiveness. You ever have that time where you bring something up to the narcissist and they're defensive? Everybody's probably shaking their head like, yeah, like every single time. Because it didn't seem like you could ever bring anything up to the narcissist. There's nothing you can bring up that says, hey, I really want you to work on this. Or like, hey, did you ever think about how you come across? Or hey, I want to be able to portray my feelings and my thoughts, but it doesn't seem like you, like, whew, that's all defensiveness that pops up. There's never a curiosity. There's never an aspect of wanting to learn how to grow. There's never an aspect of wanting to learn how to change and become different. For a narcissist, that's almost like anti what a narcissist is all about. So when you think of narcissism, you think of like a scale. Like some people are like, I don't know if my narcissist has like the traits of it or they're like full-blown narcissistic. You know, at the end of the day, a lot of it really doesn't matter. A lot of it doesn't matter about the labels that we try to put on people, the diagnosis that we try to give on people, when really we're just trying to describe their behavior. We're trying to describe how loving are they? How emotionally invested are they in this relationship? How committed are they to be able to be with this person for longer than 6 months before they go to the next person? How honest are they willing to be with their communication and how they interact with one another? How transparent are they going to be with their past or with the truth of what they've actually done or the people they've actually been with? How vulnerable are they going to be with their emotions, with their thoughts, with their feelings, and be able to communicate that to you and have that received back? How are they to be able to hear your feelings and to understand what you're going through or how you're dealing with life in a certain instance? You see, narcissism might be on a spectrum, and it might be from 0 to 100, from healthy to toxic, but at the end of the day, abuse is abuse. And that's honestly what I'm on here a lot of times to bring awareness on, because a lot of times people are in life and they're in watching these YouTube videos or they're in watching something and all of a sudden something clicks and they're like, wait a second, like that happened to me. Like that person made me doubt my reality. It's called gaslighting. That person lied to me. That person manipulated me. That person cheated on me. That person blamed me for something. That person made me apologize for what they did to me. And people start to connect the dots and like, wait a second, this is something that I've struggled with. This is something that I've dealt with. This is something that's been in my life time and time again. And I never had an idea. I never had a clue. I was never able to put my finger on what was actually going on. And then they start to realize that whether this person has narcissistic traits or full-blown narcissism, diagnosed NPD, sociopath, psychopath, whatever it is, they start to realize and they start to find clarity and they start to find truth when they hear people talk about it. If you're in one of these relationships, you might need to take a really hard look of what are the facts about this relationship and how is it impacting you and your life on a day-to-day basis. You can't be with a narcissist without getting burned. You can't be with a narcissist without getting hurt, without getting used, without getting abused. Because that is what happens. When you put yourself in a room with someone who only cares about themselves, you're going to get hurt. And you're going to be the fall guy. And they're not going to care. If you've been in this type of relationship, if you've been with someone that you're struggling, wondering about this, and you want some help trying to understand, whether that's closure or understand the things that are going on, I'd love to be able to talk to you. Go to my website, rawmotivations.com, click the link down below to schedule a one-on-one. Would love to be able to talk to you and interact to help give you closure, to help you break out of a trauma bond, to help you work through different things that are happening in your life that just make you feel crazy, that make you not understand what's going on. If you're interested in learning more about that, go on there, schedule a time. If you want to be a part of another community that's trying to heal and is trying to grow, visit the Apple Store or the Google Play Store and download the NARC app, N-A-R-C, Narcissistic Abuse Recovery Community. A community of like-minded people that are on there trying to encourage one another and trying to help each other grow and change to be better after they're getting out of a relationship with narcissistic abuse and that toxic person that held so much over them. We'd love to be able to have you a part of that. If you're listening here, we've got coming up April 6th, 2022, we've got an amazing webinar coming up hosted by Stronger Than Before. I'm one of the panelists, and I'm super excited about that. We've got several of the people that are on there, other creators, other NARC Talk in the community, psychologists, different people like that are going to be on that. So April 6th, you can get the link down in the bio or on my Beacons page. I would love to be able to have you visit and just be able to attend to be able to see what it looks like to be able to identify and to overcome narcissistic abuse. Thanks so much.